Welcome to the Noon Book Club.
Hello, everybody. I know Jen is letting you all in now, and welcome to the first Noon Book Club of 2022. I am Eleanor Mills. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Noon, and I'm delighted today to have with us Anne Youngson, who is going to be talking about her amazing book, which I have to say I've really enjoyed, called Three Women in a Boat. It's upside down and back to front the way I'm showing it, but I'm sure many of you have already got your copy. And welcome, very nice to see you. So I think Anne is a particularly brilliant addition to the Noon Book Club because her own story so mimics all the things that Anne exemplifies, all the things that we like to talk about at Noon. If ever there was a new chapter post 50, it's got to be Anne. She's just told me that she didn't actually, her first book was published when she was 70 and it won a prize, the Paul Torday Prize. And this book, Three Women in a Boat, has also been massively successful, BBC Two Radio Book Club pick, lots of other stunning prizes. So I think that Anne really exemplifies everything we say about it's never too late. There's so much more to come and moving into a new chapter in your midlife. So Anne, welcome. Hello.
Hello, I'm pleased to be here.
Great. So I'm going to kick off as we usually do on our new book clubs by reading a little extract from the book, and then we'll go ahead and have a bit of a conversation. It would be brilliant for many of you to put your questions to us as you want, and I'll make sure that we flow some of those up to Anne. I've got lots of questions too, and do get involved in the chat. That's always great. And it's so brilliant to see so many of you on this dreary January day. And bear with me a bit. I've actually technically got COVID. I'm feeling okay. I'm kind of getting to the end of my sentence. But if I suddenly start looking a bit red or coughing, that's why. Luckily, I'm very uninfectious because I'm on a Zoom call, not in real life. So, Anne, why don't you take it away? Three Women in a Boat. I love the extract.
Okay. So I'll read a short extract from near the beginning, and this is the book. If you haven't read it, is about two women in sort of middle age, horrible word, but over 50, who have come together on a canal boat. And this is Eve, who's left a fairly high-powered job in industry and is now on in a completely weird position on a canal boat where she's never been before. Eve could think of nothing at all to think about. The bend ahead was 500 yards away and it would take about 10 minutes to reach it. Between now and then, there was nothing that clamoured for attention. No change in the trees growing down either side of the canal. No hazards that would challenge her ability to remember to push the tiller to the left, to move the boat to the right. No plans to make for what would happen next. That morning, she had woken on the hard bed made up on the bench in the middle cabin, conscious of not having decided the night before what to wear. The anxiety was acute until, wide awake, she realized it was irrelevant. She had no need to worry because she had almost no clothes to choose between, and it mattered not at all what she wore. Nor could she think of anything else to worry about. It was worrying. Hearing the chink of mugs as Sally came through the cabin with 2 cups of coffee, it occurred to her that she might worry about how long it would take her to find this stranger intolerable. What would be the amalgam of habits, opinions, idiosyncrasies, and character defects, which made everyone she had ever known impossible to live with sooner or later? But for the moment, she had not spotted what these were, and there was, therefore, no point worrying about it.
Thanks, Anne. So this is a lovely book. It really resonated with me because I think it so captures that point that at noon we call the noon time, when you're in that state of flux where everything that you have known has kind of been thrown up into the air and you're not really very sure what's going to come next. And of course, there are many reasons why one might end up in that that place at midlife, and many of the things that we talk about on the site: redundancy, divorce, bereavement, emptiness, or just that sense that you haven't got that much time left, and the bit that you have got left, you really want to make it count. So Anne, tell us a bit about why you decided to write this. Why you decided to write this book, and why the canal. I love all the stuff about the canal, but tell us a bit about the canal.
Okay. Well, I suppose I actually I wanted to write a book about a journey, because I love books about journeys, and I think that on a journey you have the opportunity to think at a slower pace and to get to know the people you're traveling with in a different way. Even just going for a walk. I mean, during lockdown, you know, I was meeting all of my friends to go for a walk because we weren't allowed indoors, and you find that you have different conversations just walking than you would do if you were sitting in a coffee shop having a chat. So I wanted to write a book about a journey, and I needed it to be a slow journey. And throughout my childhood, we went on canal holidays, and in fact, my first holiday with when I first got together with my husband, the first thing we did was go on a canal boat. And then my sister, in fact, lived on a canal boat after she and her husband retired. They lived on a canal boat, so I have quite a strong connection with the canals, and they are a very special place. They're it's hard to describe, and I hope I have captured it to some extent, quite how much of a sort of a linear infrastructure they are. You know, sort of they're a very strange place, and they're also fascinating from the point of view of how they came about and how they were constructed. So I put two women on a canal boat. So if you like, it's Huckleberry Finn for the over 50s, you know, because it is about discovering yourself as you drift slowly down on water.
Yeah, and I think what's so clever about it being on a canal is it's that sense of being both in a place which is familiar, but also somewhere but giving you a completely different take on it. And I love the way in the book they seem to move between worlds. So the world almost that they want to be in is or they begin to realise that the slower pace of the canal and the different kind of otherworldliness of the canal is actually a great kind of contrast to the lives, that these rather kind of frenetic or suburban lives that they've both left. Was that intentional?
Yes. I mean, that is exactly what being on a canal boat does. Actually, it stops you worrying. You start to worry about where the next water point is, to make sure that you've got enough water for a cup of tea in the morning, and that is almost the only thing that you can worry about, you know. So it does take you outside of your sort of your normal concern. And I also like the way that you know, you do travel, as you say, you travel between worlds, because you're you know, it's very rural, but then you come to a town, and actually if you go through a town you know well. We used to live outside Stratford-on-Avon, and we once went on a canal holiday where we went through the middle of Stratford-on-Avon, and I had absolutely no idea where I was, because you know, the connection between the canal and the place beside it, there's somehow a little distance between the two.
I think that's totally right, and also that the canal itself is so much its own world. One of my husband's friends had the boat, and we used to go on it quite a lot, and I remember exactly that feeling of going through all the way along the Regent's Park Canal, all the way through to kind of East London, kind of out to the Thames. And I've lived in London all my life, and yet there were places and bridges that I've been over, but just seeing it from that different vantage point suddenly made it all feel rather magical and new.
And new, exactly, yeah.
So no, I thought that was a very kind of clever motif. And why were you particularly drawn to these women? Where did they come from? Are they based on people that you know? I couldn't help wondering whether Eve was maybe a little bit you.
Yeah, so they're not. I don't base characters on people that I know, because people are very complex, and of course, if you create a character, there's no way you can adequately represent all of the complexity of somebody that you know. So they're I suppose that every character I create is probably there's some essence of me. There's some aspect of me in all of them. And obviously, Eve is yes. I mean, Eve's experiences are based on my experience. Eve is not me, but her experiences are based on my experience. And Sally is. I suppose Sally is an amalgam of all the women I've known who've underestimated their own potential at the start of their lives. So she represents my belief that everybody has the opportunity to rethink. Just because, so many years have passed since the date when you were born, it doesn't limit your ability to rethink what you're doing with your life and where you're going. So that's what Sally represents.
No, I really love that. There was a particular line kind of towards the end which said, "You're the person you've always been, but now she's risen to the surface."
Yes.
And that really chimed with me, because we talk at Noon about that kind of 50 or midlife is the time when you become the person that you're supposed to be. And I think that there's a real sense for many of us that we spend a lot of the earlier parts of our lives kind of jumping through the hoops that we've been set, whether that's about kind of having a family or these days kind of establishing a career. And for me, that this point in midlife is the kind of flex where you suddenly go, well, okay, I've done that. I've done the things that people expected me to do, but actually, I don't think that's me at all. I think I'm actually over here. And I thought that your portrayal of both these women really captured that.
Yes, I quite agree. I mean, you're the targets that seem so enormous when you're young, sort of starting a career and forming a relationship and having children. These targets all seem they seem absolutely enormous. And then suddenly you realize that you've achieved those, but there's still more that you can achieve. There's things that you haven't done because you've been busy starting a career and getting married and having children. There are things that you desperately want to do, or desperately want to achieve, or want to experience, and you just haven't had time to do it. And in your 50s, you can stop worrying about making progress or finding somebody to live with. You can just get on and be who you want to be.
And have you seen that? I mean, that's very much the theme of this book, but have you very much seen that in the women that you know in your life? Is that do you see that happening around you? You're a little bit kind of beyond where maybe kind of 20 years on from that kind of 50-something pivot. So I'm quite interested in your experience of what you saw happening to the women around you when they kind of hit 50 and beyond.
I don't know that. Yes. I mean, I have known some, but I don't. I still feel that. I mean, my first book was about somebody who was who was older than these two women, suddenly reassessing her life, deciding she was leading the wrong life. I don't think that there's probably that. I don't know that many people who've decided that they were leading completely the wrong life. But I do still feel that maybe it's getting better, but I feel that we're somehow conditioned to believe that we're past a certain point, it's too late. And this is ridiculous. I mean, they're now talking about, there's been a program on Radio 4 recently about the aging population and how we can't afford to allow people to stop work. I mean, I retired in my 50s. Given that you described to me that you chose Noon because at 50 or halfway through, which is something I've always absolutely subscribed to. That's my mindset. So I retired with 50 years. I mean, you have to do something with them. You can't just waste them by doing Sudoku. And going to coffee mornings. You do have to achieve something. I don't know. Of course, in my career, I didn't actually know. It was only after I retired and I started working as a consultant with a couple of other women, the first time that I'd really worked closely with women. Actually, it was quite a breakthrough for me. And that's also reflected in the book. Actually, it was quite a breakthrough how close friendships with women. With other women can be really informative in the way you see yourself and the way you can develop as a person with the support of other women around you.
Yes, and I think that what's really important about that actually is sometimes finding some new friendships in your
Yes.
50s. I mean,
Mm.
as somebody who's I made a big transition myself from having been a kind of editor and very kind of in a particular world to suddenly being in a different kind of a world. And the people who really helped me most along that journey, of course, my family and some of my old friends, but actually are some new friends that I've made along the way who can see you in a new light and
Yes.
who are not kind of too wedded to the old version of you. And I think that that's very helpful in trying to move into a new chapter yourself.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, that was what I thought when I took early retirement. I thought the one thing I had to guard against was only ever mixing with people like me, because
Mm.
that's a very reductive place to be. You know, it's only listening to people who have the same, you know, who are in exactly the similar social setting, similar age, you know, similar life circumstances, who are likely to agree with you about absolutely everything, and so it distorts your worldview. And so I did, you know, I started doing, I think I said to you, I started doing writing courses as soon as I retired, because I knew I wanted to write. And, you know, I was just the first session I went to, I was just bowled over by how unlike me all the other people in the room were, you know, and I was quite intimidated by the fact that they were so unlike me. I thought, what am I doing here? And some of those people have still remained my closest friends. And as you say, they've been really helpful and really informative in what I've done since, simply because they were unlike me.
Yes, and one of the things I liked about this book actually was the range of characters in it. There are these two kind of middle-aged or midlife women at the kind of center of it, but I like the fact that they are encountering quite a lot of kind of, you know, what one might call kind of ne'er-do-wells on the canals, and kind of drug dealers or people who lead a more kind of itinerant life. I like the classlessness of it, and the kind of seamless way that on the waterways, I think particularly, that lots of different kinds of people rub up against each other, and that there was a kind of fraternity or a sorority in that kind of watery world.
Yeah, the canals are exactly like that. Actually, they are classless. People are there on the canals for lots of different reasons, and some of them are there because they have spare money, spare time, you know, and this is what they choose to do with it. But there's lots of people who are there for other reasons, you know, other alternative lifestyles that they've chosen. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that it's a kind of cheaper way to live, or also that it's you're a bit Robin Hood on the canal, aren't you? You're
Yes.
slight kind of outcast, that you're you're kind of in charge of your own fate.
Yes.
A bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Really. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, somebody somebody said to me that and had I chosen the canals, because I'm talking about because canals were constantly changing, you know, throughout history they've changed. I've tracked that through the book. You know, they started off, you know, they were just like motorways, you know, or railways. They were a transport link for goods, you know, and you know, and they've come all this way through to being the sort of alternative lifestyles. And had I chosen that because the two women are also looking at alternative lifestyles, which I have to say wasn't a link I'd thought of, but I thought it was a good one, so I'd use it again.
Yeah, no, well, I think the canal is a good metaphor, isn't it, for a kind of changing use, both of yourself, kind of, you know, for yourself and for your boat, and
yeah,
and it's a great metaphor for kind of change of metaphor places, I think, and transformation.
yeah.
There's a good question here saying, what inspired you to become an author after leaving corporate life? And how did you go about making that transition?
Well, I think I'd always, I had always, and I don't think I'm necessarily, by no means unique in this. I had always thought in my own mind that I was a writer. It was just that wasn't what I couldn't. I don't know that I had anything that I felt was important enough to say, or anything that I particularly wanted to say when I was younger. And I used to write the odd short story, you know, to amuse myself. But I always thought of myself, I always sort of observed as a writer. You know, I would sort of you know, compose whole sentences in my head to describe what I was looking at. So I had this interior view of myself, if you like, and so when I had the opportunity to stop working full time, I thought, well, you know, I better find out. So I went and did an undergraduate diploma at Oxford. They have a 2-year undergraduate writing diploma, and because I think I know that there's a lot of negative feeling about teaching creative writing, but actually it's not teaching so much as the mixing with other people who are also writing, and mixing with people who are professional writers who are going to judge what it is you've written. So you've got your own personal judgment that you can hear or read what other people in the class are writing, and understand where you sit in that. And then you've got people giving you professional judgment, and then you've got the stimulus. You've got people suggesting angles to come at, or things that you have to write, and I just loved it. So,
did you find it hard to find your authorial voice? I mean, I was very struck in this book. I mean, as years of being an editor, and I'm also trying to write my own fiction, that the kind of clarity of the voices between the two is very deftly done. You don't really realise that you're swapping between two narrators, but you always know who's speaking. Was that intentional, or is that kind of quite instinctive?
Well, it's instinctive, and I'm thrilled that you say that, because it's often hard to know. But I hear their voices in my head. But I mean, authorial voice. I think I have a writing style which I think was always there. If you see what I mean. When I go back through all of the things I wrote all those years ago, I don't remember writing them, but I know that I can tell that I did. So I did, which has been very helpful for me, really. Yeah.
And there are definite kind of points in the book where you kind of feel, I'm sure, for instance, that you like a charity shop. Is that right?
Oh, I do. I love a charity shop.
What I always love when I read people's books is reading those kind of little bits which are the real author's kind of passion. So there's kind of good asides about kind of a charity shop, and kind of why it's much better to buy a jigsaw from a charity shop, so you don't know whether all the pieces are there, and all those kind of things. And I loved your bit about going to find a cookbook and kind of being prepared to take the one that was in the charity shop, because there's a real sense of the kind of tyranny of choice in the world, and that somehow the charity shop slims that down a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Somebody here is very interested to know if you're going to have a sequel. It says the ending leaves open a sequel. Is that your plan?
No, not it wasn't really, and I have been asked that a lot. I was asked that a lot about my first book, actually, and the answer to that one was an emphatic no. There was never going to be a sequel. This one I could I can see how it could happen, but my problem is I'm not sure that I could find something interesting enough for them to do. I mean, they're sort of floating off into a wonderful future, aren't they? And the future won't be wonderful, because it never is. The future will be made up of the same things as the past, which is peaks and troughs, and some dull bits, some exciting bits, but I could think of several exciting things that might happen to them, and ways in which they could develop further. But I think that I do tend to write about people who are at a point of major change. And so if I wrote a sequel, I would be writing about people who were having accommodated the major change, and who were developing through it, which is not a book that I'm necessarily ready to write just now. So I think we should just think of them living happily ever after.
Yeah, well, one of the people on the chat here, Gillian, disagrees. She says, I'm worried about Sally's future at the end. Eve will be away at work, but what will Sally actually do? She seems to replace her children with trumpet, but to me, her new life seems a bit empty.
Right. Oh yes, no, I quite agree. Yes, I wasn't quite sure what Sally would do either, but I think she'll do something. I thought she might marry Owen. Do you think she might marry Owen?
Oh, I thought so. I hope so.
Not that is, of course, a career in itself, and I'm sure she will do. Perhaps she'll set up a knitting shop.
I thought maybe she might become a writer, because she was so interested in books.
Yeah, she might become a writer. Yeah.
So Carenza, very lovely, clever lady and a brilliant writer herself, she says, hello, for both of you, is the revelation that you gradually become the person you were always meant to be in your noon time more to do with the confidence of wisdom, age, experience, or more to do with caring less what others think? What do you think on that?
I think that's bang on, actually. I think it's a combination of the both, because I do think as you get older you care less about what people think, And if you and of course I have got friends who carry on caring what other people think, which I always think is it's debilitating. Yes, it's debilitating really, and it's a shame, and you should get over it. And but the other thing is the confidence. I do think that people we should all have just that much more confidence in ourselves. But that is something where it might be hard to develop in midlife if you haven't laid the foundations when you were younger. You'd have to work very hard at it. I was very lucky in my in my background that I've always been really well supported, and so I come out sort of bouncing with confidence. But not everybody's that lucky.
I mean, do you think that in some people that confidence is kind of quite inherent? I mean, you had a very high-powered career, didn't you, in industry? And you were saying that you hadn't really worked with very many women. And so, do you think that you had that confidence when you were younger, which is what enabled you to do that kind of job in the first place?
Yes, I suppose so. I don't know whether it was confidence or lack of imagination, really, because it never actually occurred to me that I couldn't, which I suppose is a form of confidence, really. It just never occurred to me that I might actually not be as good as the people around me in the office. Why would I think that? Just because they were men and I was a woman, I couldn't see that would make any difference.
Where do you think that confidence came from in yourself?
Yes, I think it, and from upbringing, that I was always encouraged. I mean, not exactly encouraged. I was just quietly enabled, I suppose, to do what I wanted to do and to think that I was able to do it.
Yes, I think that's interesting. So I have two daughters, and one of the things that I was most keen to do as a mum was to inspire them with a sense of what I call agency, a sense that they could have an effect on the world, that they could kind of slightly bend the world to their, not like some kind of terrible tyrant, kind of bend it to their will, but to know that in a situation they could step up and take the reins and have an effect, and that they weren't passive passengers. And for me, that's always been kind of very important, that you could. And I've also done a lot of kind of leading kind of quite big teams, and also been in quite a kind of macho kind of place. And I wonder. Corinne's saying, does that help? I think having been quite successful in one's first career, it's helpful, but can also be slightly terrifying when you then approach the next thing, because there's almost a kind of pressure of success. I mean, I remember when I left the Sunday Times after so long, someone saying to me, "Oh, Eleanor, you'll be great, you'll bounce back," and just thinking that was so not how I felt at that moment. I felt so kind of crushed and kind of sad, and like it had all kind of, the floor had opened underneath me. That almost felt like another pressure, that you were going to be expected to kind of, just bounce into something else and do well.
Yes, because that's another aspect of being able to do things, that you didn't previously think you were capable of or hadn't previously tried. There's actually the fear of failure, and I think that if you have a successful first career, the fear of failure is probably and maybe I do think I suffer from that. Actually, I suffer from a fear of failure because I've always been fairly, sort of competitive. And
yes, there's a lot about competition in the book, isn't there? Yes, do you want to, if you want to play a game, do you only want to play it if you can win? Is that you?
Exactly. It's I try not to be. My son always says so, but he always wins anyway. But yes, exactly. I think fear of failure is an interesting thing, and I don't know whether the fear of failure does actually improve as you grow older, or whether you're still worried about about stepping up.
I tell you what, where I came to on it was that I kind of asked myself the question: how much achievement does anybody need? How much is enough? And I kind of thought that I had to have ticked enough achievement boxes by that point, and therefore it was worth taking a punt on the stuff that the thing I really cared about. And what I think I've learned in the last couple of years, it's about a year since we launched in, but since I left the Sunday Times, was that in the purpose of doing something that you really love and that you really believe in and which inspires other people or kind of connects with them, which I'm sure you've had with your writing, is something much more kind of pure and I don't know, much more satisfying than just kind of, you know, pure kind of brute public achievement, as it were.
Yes, yes, that's right. I mean, you need to feel that you're achieving something, don't you? It's just that what you're achieving can become different. It doesn't need to be quite as you know. Well, I suppose I'm lucky because, of course, my second career, I've had recognition beyond what I had in my first one in terms of a sort of public recognition. But that's not the point, really. It's achieving something. It's you know, every book is an achievement, and it's not about the recognition necessarily. It's about doing something well.
Yes, and doing something, I think, which you really that you value yourself or feel like you've done to the absolute best of your ability, or that turned out in the way that you wanted it to, not whatever anyone else thinks.
Yes. Exactly, although they never quite do, never as perfect on the page as they are in my head.
I know, but I think that's probably because you're quite a perfectionist.
Yes.
So let me see. Yeah, so when you began reading at the museum, did you tell your friends you'd begun writing a book, or did you keep it to yourself until you saw whether it would get published? That's an interesting question, because that tallies well with the sense of achievement. But would you talk about it before you knew it was going to be a success, or did you keep it quite private?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, actually, because no, I told nobody. I mean, obviously, I mean, I was writing it. I was doing a PhD at the time, actually, and I started writing it then. It wasn't part of the PhD, actually, but I was writing with the support of a professional writer who was my tutor. And I started writing it, and I didn't necessarily share it with anybody. I have some close friends who are writers, whom I share everything with. But other than that, I don't share, and my family obviously knew I was writing, but I didn't share it with anybody. And I think it's because I didn't have although we talked about confidence before, I didn't have well, I've always been very anxious about over-claiming, and I didn't want to stand up and say, actually, I'm a writer, until I could say I'm a writer, and nobody could say, well, you know, sort of prove it. Which does mean getting published. And I don't think I set out to get published necessarily. I set out to enjoy myself by writing. And so I didn't want to I was afraid that if I set myself the goal of getting published, then it would sour the pleasure that I took out of writing. So I just kept writing, and the tutor that I was working with read what I'd written and said, well, I think, you know, read the start of Meet Me at the Museum and said, well, I know an agent who would undoubtedly love this book. And
Wow.
And he introduced me to her, and she read the first 10,000 words and said, yes, just keep writing, and we'll see what we can do. So I was sort of, you know, you talked about agency. I was actually pretty passive, really, in the business of getting published. You know, it was only because somebody said, you've got to do something with this, and here's how, that it happened.
And were you particularly keen to write about kind of women at this stage, kind of women in this stage of kind of transition? Was that always the plan?
No, it was just the yes. I didn't think of it like that. I just thought about what interested me. But actually, I also felt that an awful lot of books that include which have older women center stage, they tend to be looking back on their lives. They tend to be people, you know, women talking about their lives, their childhoods, and so on, from the point of view of old age, as if once you get to old age, it's all over. And I just wanted to say, well, it's not all over. You know, it's not all over as long as you know you know, there's as long as you're still here, it's not all over. So I wanted to write something about somebody who was still moving forward with life, even though they were, you know, as I think I described the character in Meet Me in the Museum, was that she had more of her life behind her than ahead of her. But, you know, she still had life ahead of her, and yeah, she should do something with it.
Yeah, I think in Three Women in a Boat, I think there's quite a clever contrast between the still very kind of youthful and all the kind of physical activity of Sally and Eve, and then of course Anastasia, who is old and is,
Yes.
possibly dying. And I think that actually makes the point very clearly that at 50, you're still vigorous and strong. You can pull a boat up through a lock.
yes.
You're not, you're not kind of dying. You're in no way at the kind of end of your life. So I think that actually the kind of spacing of the characters, or the different kinds of characters in the book, make that point very clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And even Anastasia, is still she's still the person she always was, and she's still sort of fighting to lead the life she always wanted to lead.
Yes, absolutely. And I love her. I mean, she really reminded me of my own granny, who at 97 was still kind of standing on her head and going to do what she used to talk about, doing the meals for the old dears in the village, most of whom were 20 years younger than her.
Exactly. I'm going to be one of those.
I hope to be too, definitely. But I think it's very important to remember that at this point we're still, still very vigorous and got lots of stuff that we can do.
Oh, yes.
Liz Ramsey says, who are your favourite fiction authors to read, and what's your favourite book that isn't your own? Good question.
Well, I always find this question quite difficult to answer, actually, because I just read an awful lot, and I tend to read, in quite an eclectic mix of things. So I read. I just read everything, but I would often say that Anne Tyler is one of my favourite authors, because she writes about domestic life. She writes about ordinary people doing ordinary things in an ordinary domestic setting, but she makes them extraordinary. I mean, everybody is extraordinary, but she's so good at making their lives seem extraordinary and meaningful and engaging. So I love her books, but it is almost impossible. And my favourite book, which I haven't written, is probably A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. Which is really a really short book, and it has just got absolutely everything. It's because it's humorous, actually. It's short, it's funny, it's amazingly moving, and nothing happens. Really nothing, and nothing happens. And I think, if I could have written A Month in the Country, I'd be happy. It is a perfect gem.
Oh, that's good. And so in the book, there's Eve, who only reads kind of crime and histories of canals, and Sally, who reads absolutely everything. And Eve feels slightly intimidated by the fact that Sally's reading all the time. You're a Sally, are you?
Yes. Although I do also read crime. Funnily enough, in lockdown, I haven't historically read an awful lot of crime, but in lockdown, I found I was reading lots of crime, because you wanted something, where it was all going to come out all right in the end, and it didn't really matter. So I was reading an awful lot of Montalbano in lockdown, but yes, I know I'm probably a Sally. Yes.
No, I think it's very important to read a massive mixture of things. I like reading everything from kind of Georgette Hare or chick lit to the latest Jonathan Franzen, or we were just talking about. I just read the new Dave Eggers, which I highly recommend. One called The Every. While I was away on holiday, that was a good one. So I just think more. You never lose by. I mean, whatever book it is, however bad or good, you always learn something from it, I think.
Yeah, I see somebody actually has just popped up with somebody was saying that their favorite book was a book published by Persephone Books. I absolutely love Persephone Books. So because they're yes, I just love them. I love the look and the feel of them, and the titles that they choose. There's some wonderful Persephone books.
Yeah, I'm just writing that down, actually. Yeah, this is a Little Boy Lost
by Margarita Lasky. Yes, exactly. Fantastic.
That's the big tip on this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And those who like Anne Tyler, I love Anne Enright as well, I must say.
Yes, and Anne Enright, yes. But I find there's so many Irish writers who just have this feel for language, where it appears to be it's almost singing on the page. Beautiful.
Yes. I think sometimes as a writer you can feel quite intimidated when you read people like that, because it's just so good. You begin to feel very kind of intimidated about whether anything you write will ever be good enough. I read English literature at university, so I was talking to my daughter, because my daughter's now up at Oxford studying English as well, and I was talking about the paralysis that that can sometimes inflict on you when you think that you might try and write some fiction yourself, because you're so aware of all these things and forms. She was reading Jacob's Room, Virginia Woolf while we were away on holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about form, and then with those kind of conversations make me feel like I'd never write anything that would be worth reading.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But there again, you don't know how much work has gone into producing the perfect thing that you're reading.
Yes, true.
So if you think that you could sit down and write, Mrs. Dalloway,
No.
and exactly, but you probably that you have to start by writing a first draft of Mrs. Dalloway and then working your way through to something which is as close to perfection as you can get.
Yes, no, I think that's true, and you have to start somewhere. And
Yeah.
and I think also when you've been an editor for as long as I have, it's jolly hard to kind of switch off the kind of editor's critical bit,
Yeah.
and then and actually just kind of write something. And you have to just kind of you can always improve something that's on the page. It's the blank screen is always the hardest.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you write? Do you get up in the morning and do kind of that kind of before breakfast pages, or do you kind of have breakfast and sit down and treat it a bit more like a job? What's your
I probably treat it a bit more like a job now, but I actually write longhand. I write, I find it much easier to be creative longhand because you haven't got the blank screen, and you can be thinking about it as you're writing, and nothing's fixed. If it's on the screen, it feels as if it's fixed, and if it's wrong, the temptation is to go back and change it straight away, and I just lose the thread of what I'm trying to do. So I write it, anywhere, and I've got a deadline at the moment, actually, so I am sort of trying to spend every morning doing sort of 2 or 3 hours. Probably
what's the new book about? More canals?
No. The new book is actually set during the Second World War. I mean, it's not about the war; it's about the impact of the war on a particular segment of the community. But I have some short.
Cryptic, you mean?
I have some short stories coming out next. Actually, that's been fun. I love writing short stories.
How come I would have thought that writing short stories is you kind of have got an idea which might make a book, but you squash it into less pages. No.
No. I short stories just tend to, I have an idea. I mean, short stories is about capturing a, sort of a particular moment, a particular mood, or a particular idea in a fairly and these ideas. I mean, when I started writing Meet Me at the Museum, actually, I thought I was writing a short story, and then but it doesn't come. I have to have when I write a short story, I have to see the whole of it the whole pattern of it in my head. So I know something's a short story when I can see the whole pattern in my head, and I just write it down.
And that's interesting. So when you're writing a novel, is there kind of more that needs to kind of unfold as it develops?
I have no idea. Yes, exactly. I just I find out as I go along what's going to happen. I'll work it through.
Oh, that's definitely interesting to hear.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me in Three Women in a Boat was the lack of sadness. So this is a woman Eve has lost her. She's lost her career, which she's been doing for the last 25, 30 years. And Sally has just walked out of her marriage. And yet neither of them was sad. Now, I can tell you, when I lost my job, I was very sad. And when I see other people who've left their marriages, there seems to be a lot of sadness. So that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Kind of, where's the sadness? Were they sad, but you didn't write about it? Or do you think they weren't sad?
I think that I think that the journey took them away from the sadness that might have arisen had they stayed where they were. And I think Eve was angry. I mean, you go through, and I'm sure you were too. When I've got have a friend who had a really high-powered job in publishing, and who was found to be not needed in that job anymore, and she was angry. I mean, but the sadness comes later when you've got over the anger and the injustice, and I think so. So I think that they go on the journey at the point at which they might have become sad, and going on the journey prevents them from being sad, because you're too busy thinking about the bend up ahead and the next lock and the next water point, rather than thinking backwards. over what it was that resulted in you being able to float down the canal. You're thinking forward, not backwards, because sadness comes from thinking backwards, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, no, maybe, or certainly feeling. I see what you I see what you say there, because I think that the canal journey creates a kind of magical gap, doesn't it, for both of them? You talk
Yes.
about this word gap quite a lot in the book,
Yes.
because it creates a kind of space,
Yes.
almost a kind of liminal space between one kind of life and what that's going to be. And I liked your metaphor in that you were talking about the even her job had one of the things that she did was look at all the things that might be possible, the kind of innovations that were kind of in the crust or that were in the soup. And there's definitely a sense in this that they're exploring kind of what might come next. And so I can see that that's more interesting to write about. I was just curious as to whether you can really sidestep the sadness.
Okay. Well, I mean,
both of those things that effectively. It's fiction.
Eve is struck by sadness when she goes to a funeral, and she finds herself crying for the fact that nobody would be crying at her funeral, because she's suddenly struck by the entire emptiness of her life, by the lack of close connections, by her the lack of importance of other people to her, and therefore of her to other people. And she suddenly understands how empty her life is. So there is a moment at which it completely hits her. Yeah.
And maybe for Sally, what she's felt so unfulfilled in her marriage that actually she's beyond sadness.
Exactly. Yeah, she's just excited to be out the other side.
I'm just that was my only that was my only kind of query. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was I really enjoyed the physicality of the characters in the story. The kind of Eve's kind of concern about kind of her body, and her shorts are getting baggier, and there's quite a lot about their physicality. Sally having her hair kind of tinted pink, and what do you think about that? Because of course that's something that we all have to deal with kind of at this point, that you're not. And I've got my very beautiful teenage daughters, and you think, well, I'm not that anymore. There's a sense of coming to terms. We were talking before we came on there about a kind of invisibility, or that feeling of that kind of physicality changing.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about your views on that.
Well, I think I referenced there. I mean, Sally has a pretty neutral attitude towards her body, actually, because she just which is almost a question of her being absent from her own life. But Eve has Eve is constantly aware of the fact that she's all the wrong shapes and wearing all the wrong clothes, which I think a lot of us do. And I do think that I enjoy clothes, actually, and I do think clothes can make a difference to your mood. What your how you feel. It's important you understand how you see yourself, really, how you that you feel. Well, it's important to me that I feel as if I'm dressed in a way that reflects what I feel about myself.
Yeah, that the outside matches the inside. I mean, that's certainly what we get with Sally, isn't it? That she finally begins to look like the person that she really is, rather than the Marks and Sparks lady in the rather beige separates.
Exactly, and starts to develop a bit of a style. Yes. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, because I also think that at this point, a bit of a style becomes quite important, doesn't it? You can't just busk it on maybe with the physical gifts that you had kind of naturally. You have to kind of say something about who you are at this point.
Yes, I think so. And but also, I mean, there's, although in fact, Sally comes to the conclusion that she's gone too far on the, with the pink hair and the ridiculous charity shop outfit, that she's gone too far the other way. But I do think that you can be bold. I don't think we should be bland. We shouldn't be, we shouldn't be all going beige.
No, all thinking. Oh, I agree. All feeling like that we should all be kind of fading into the background.
Yes.
I love your cardigan. There's something on the chat here saying it's obvious that you like clothes. They like your outfit.
My cardigan, yes, charity shop.
But I think that part of the reason that the book feels so real is that I think you really feel like these are real people who kind of worry about the same things that the rest of us do. And I think that's part of the way that you build up this sense of them as real people.
Yes, I mean, well, as long as I'm writing about them, I'm sort of I'm with them. They're sort of part of me, and I do have I do develop an understanding of what they would think and do and say, as distinct individuals, who are not me, but and who are not each other. But yes, and how they feel about their bodies and what they choose to wear and what they choose to eat and what they choose to read. I mean, that's all part of what makes them individuals in my mind.
No, I think that's really true. So, and the history, there's quite a lot of history in this book too, isn't there, of the canals and I like the storytelling man who tells us kind of stories about the kind of canals and what happened. Is that true? Is that based on kind of real history? Was it Blissworth Tunnel or something like that? Are they real places?
Yes. Oh yes, yes. It's yes. In fact, the Blissworth Tunnel stories went on for pages and pages and pages, and my editor had to tell me to take it all out because I researched it to death. I just loved it for all that it said about man's inhumanity to man, really, and how workers were expendable. While you experimented with how to do things. So I had to slim it down. But the other one is also they are based on true stories. But I mean, the history of the canals, that was one of the really interesting things about writing the book, is that obviously I thought I knew all about canals, but I thought, well, I'll just read some history, and it is a fascinating subject. I mean, in engineering terms, they are extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And beautiful. There's lots of really beautiful architectural elements in them, and the way that they've developed and been used. It's yes, I found the history really interesting, and yes, I just hope it's not too much.
No, I'm interested that your editor took some out because I can see that you might get a bit over enthusiastic. And I'm aware that we're kind of getting towards the end of our time, but I can't let you go without having asked you this question. Enjoyed the book immensely, intrigued by no other dog. Why did you choose this particular dog to play such a pivotal role? Is it based on, I mean, I think this is really asking, is this based on a real dog in your life?
No, it's not. It's not. We have a Labrador actually, so it's not. And Labradors are so so soft, really. So I wanted a feistier dog than a Labrador. So I suppose it's based on my sister-in-law's dog. She had a sort of Patterdale Terrier who was, could be guaranteed to be an absolute nuisance one minute and an absolute love the next. And so yes, Noah is based on. You need a dog, don't you? You need a dog in this kind of.
Definitely do. So do you have any unfinished or unpublished novels sitting in a drawer? And if so, are you tempted to revisit them? And if you do and you're not, kind of why not? And why would you put them away?
Yes, I do. Yes, I have a couple or even three that are. But I have a couple which I suspect that if I got them out and edited them, I could come to I would like them, but actually it's more fun to start again. I am a dreadful editor. The one set in the Second World War, I'm in the middle of editing at the moment, and and I keep remembering as I'm doing it how much fun I had writing it and how much of a pain it is having to go through and make adjustments and take bits out here and add bits in there. So just nothing like as much fun.
That's really interesting. So in some ways it's more fun to just kind of start again and creating it from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. But I might, you never know, I might at least one of them I might fish out.
Yeah, and also on the writing process, somebody says, how do you balance your writing with being a wife and mother? What do you do with your family? Do you ever wish you could get away by yourself to think, let alone write?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah, my children are grown up now and they have children of their own. And
yeah, because I know you're a grandmother, aren't you?
and they're an absolute delight. And so no, it would have been difficult when I was younger. I mean, I think I would have found it quite, but I suppose I'm thinking in terms of my life when I was younger. It was entirely geared around, I was either at work or I was, doing things with the family, and there was just no space. But now, oh no, it's. I mean, that's the other thing about being older is you have space in your life.
Yes, I think that's very important, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
And I think that's also something that as we get older we should talk about more, because I mean I certainly did that too. I was a mum and I was doing a massive job and I had 2 young girls, and there was no time for anything. And actually, one of the great things about getting a bit older and your children getting bigger or being off at university, whatever, is that there suddenly is more time for the things that you like, that you're interested in doing yourself.
Yes.
I think that's partly why you decided you came to write later.
Yes, I think so. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas you have a sense of responsibility, don't you, to the things you've committed to, and then when those commitments reduce, you have time to do what makes you happy. I mean, not having the children and having the job what made me happy, but happy in a different way.
Well, it's a different kind of fulfillment, isn't it? I mean, I think that's one of the messages that we should be trying to kind of get out there. I mean, one of the reasons that I set up Noon was that I wanted younger women to look forward to this point in their life, to see it as an age of opportunity, a point where you can write that book that you've always wanted to write, or go on that holiday, or you have a bit more space and time because you've done some of the things that you're supposed to have done. But I don't think that our culture or society sees it like that at all, and particularly not for women.
No, exactly, and I completely, I really applaud your the objectives, because I do think that we just should not be continually I don't know, feel abashed by the fact that we're we've it's a long time since we were born, so what, we're still here. And certainly when you're 50, in your 50s and 60s, I mean, you still have capacity, and you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think that you're a fantastic inspiration on that front, Anne. I love the fact that you're obviously such an accomplished, brilliant writer, and you didn't have your first book published till you were 70. I mean, that should give everybody on this call kind of some kind of inspiration, and real, our motto on Noon is so much more to come. And I really think you're a kind of a living embodiment of that. And I also think you're right that as you get older, you have more to say, I think, too.
Well, yes. I mean, I couldn't have written the fiction that I've written. I couldn't have written when I was younger, because I just didn't have that. I didn't know understanding of life, appreciation of life and experience. And yes, I hadn't got the thoughts then to put down on paper that I've got now.
Do you find yourself kind of squirreling things away to put in your books? Do you keep a notebook that you write things down, or do they just come to you as you're writing?
Yes, no, I have notebooks all over. Yes, I have notebooks. Yeah, so I wrote things down. Yeah.
I have so many notebooks. I forget what I put where, and then
exactly. You think it's important. I'm going to write that down. So you write it down in a notebook. You're doing something else in, and then you forget where you've written it down. But then you come across it later, and it'll suddenly, and you'll think, how clever! I never knew I thought that.
Oh, that's good to know. Oh, and thank you so much. I mean, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I really I love the book. I really want to go back and read the Meet Me at the Museum. And thanks so much for coming and talking to us at Noon. And I hope you'll be kind of involved in some of the things that we do in the future. I'd love to have you back.
Oh, that would be magnificent. Yes, and really appreciate it. Yes.
Oh, great. And thank you also everyone out there for listening. And we'll have another Noon book club next month, and we'll be announcing the author and how to come along and everything on our various social media channels in the next week or so. And for those of you who might be interested, we're just about to launch our first Noon course, which is how to date successfully in midlife, which is being run by Dr. Mary McLeod, who's an incredible evolutionary biologist who has a completely radical approach to how we should be thinking about the partners that we want at this point. It really has some interesting things to say. So I would really encourage you to come to her tasting session on Saturday, if that might apply to you. And then we've got a couple more courses launching. Lisa Unwin about how to get back into the job market, if that's interesting. And incredible Christina Ainides on just rebooting yourself in midlife and how to kind of change your mindset. So keep a lookout for some of those. And we've got lots more events and things coming up on Noon, and more stories and copy on the site. And also we'll be running some more retreats this year, which we're really excited about, and we've got some dates on that. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for listening. I hope I haven't been too croaky. I'm going to take myself back to my COVID bed. And thanks so much. See you all soon. And
Okay.
thanks so much, Anne, for joining, and thanks as always to Transworld for making it all possible, and to lovely Jen for running the webinar. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.